We're in a Bible series right now that we're calling Essentials, Spiritual Disciplines for a Flourishing Life. How do we structure our lives so that the grace of God can routinely interact with us day to day? And one of the things we're doing every week, is to highlight different vocations where Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, we need spiritual disciplines. We need the presence of God. It is a false assumption to say, well, there's a secular world and that's where I work, and then there's a sacred world and that's where I go to church. False. All of life is sacred. And if we're going to grow up in Jesus, we have to realize how what we do vocationally or however we spend our week links up with the kingdom. That is the primary place of discipleship. So this week, I'm really excited about our focus because it is family, parenting, and caretaking. So if you're a stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad, if you're caring for an elderly parent, this week we want to honor you. We want to pray for you because that is sacred work. But first, let's get clarity on how that work links up with the kingdom of God. So from the beginning, God designed families to be the place where his love and presence would be known, passed down from generation to generation. So for stay-at-home moms and caregivers, the daily tasks, laundry, cleaning, cooking, these mirror God's own heart for his people. Throughout the Bible, we see him feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, providing a home for his family. So every meal made, every floor swept, every bedtime prayer is actually shaping souls and building a household of faith. It's about much more than just keeping the little buggers alive. These unseen labors serve God's mission. The kingdom isn't just built in pulpits and on the mission field. It's built around the dinner table. It's built at bedtime story time. It's these ordinary rhythms of daily life where God is raising up a covenant people for himself so that Jesus would be known among all the nations of the earth. Amen? So with that said, if you are a stay-at-home parent, if you're a caretaker, would you stand to your feet? We want to honor you and we want to pray for you. Okay? Many of you? Yeah? Okay. Guys, let's applaud these people. Stay standing. Please stay standing. If you look around, these mostly women standing, do you know that they have the most amazing job? They are shaping the future. They are raising the next generation. There's nothing more important than that. That's huge. So we honor you, and God honors you, and let us pray for you, okay? Yes. Lord, I thank you for the women and men who are standing, that you've tasked to shine forth your parental love into the world. And Lord, it's hard work, but it's glorious work. It is work that has so much impact on the world. And Lord, I just pray for these women and men standing that they would have energy day to day, that you'd give them a touch of creativity as they go about their task, and most importantly, Lord, that they would see clearly how what they're doing links up to your mission. It may feel unseen, it may feel very hard or lonely, but Lord, may they feel your very presence and the deep mission involved in caring as Jesus cared one by one for those who need help. So, Lord, thank you for these mothers and fathers, and bless them. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. One more time. Let them know your applause. All right, so let's start our Bible study. I started college when I was 18 years old, lots of enthusiasm. I'd been working a construction job, putting in concrete foundations for houses. But I got to, take off the tool belt, put it up in the garage, and pick up the books for a while. I was excited about that. I took a train from Montana, where I grew up, out to Seattle, to Northwest University. And I just all in right away. Quickly, in addition to full-time studies, I had a 15-hour-a-week job. I was in student government. I was in a rock band, intramural sports, like college, yes. But then, kind of imperceptibly, a change began to take place that surprised me. By the spring of my freshman year, so 7 or 8 months into this thing, I was in a not very good place. All that initial energy had flatlined, and I found myself on a downward trend, kind of a downward spiral. What had happened is, in order to keep up with all my involvements and commitments, I just tried harder, harder, harder. I kind of got addicted to productivity. I just got to go. And the consequence was obvious: burnout. And I was irritable, I was moody, I was just exhausted. I was honestly probably clinically depressed, just like in a really dark place that I couldn't get out of. And there's a law of diminishing returns at work. Like the more you try, the less you're getting back. And that was hard for me because at stake in seeing myself as a productive person who gets stuff done was a lot of identity issues for me. I struggled with the fear, and candidly I still do, of falling behind, feeling like I'm failing. It's very easy for me to look around the world and be like, well, I can never keep up with that person or that guy, and I can never do that. And geez, everything I do is just never enough. I'm just failing. And if you live with that mindset, if that's your identity inputs, the matrix, how does the idea of taking a rest sound? What does that mean? It means weakness. It means inefficiency. And at a deeper level, it means a failure of love, my failure to love enough. I cannot give enough, evidently. And more devastatingly, a failure to be loved. Obviously, I'm not enough to be loved by God, my parents, my friends, whatever. So at stake for me wasn't just dealing with my chronic overcommitment, which I still have. It's not just a time commitment issue. It's an identity issue. Time management, it's an identity issue. But the one thing I did see clearly at the time was this. After college, life only gets more complex. It only gets more stressful. So I realized there's a structural flaw in how I'm approaching my life here. And unless I address it at a deep level, I'm going to be tapping out very ingloriously at some point. So one day I was talking on the phone with my big sister, Caitlin. I was pouring out all my woes. And she said something really helpful. She said, you know, Ryan, you ought to think about taking a weekly Sabbath. And, you know, it just might bring some balance to your life. And I didn't know what a Sabbath really was. I didn't know how to keep it. But what I did know is that I was burned out. And what I did know is that I was on the verge of dropping out. So I'm like 19 years old, and I'm like, I don't got any other better idea. I'm going to try Sabbathing. Let's see how this goes. And honestly, guys, I've never turned back. At first, it seemed like just an amazing life hack. Like, wow, I'm sane. I've got some energy and joy. Wow, and then it impacted my commitments. As we'll see, I'll talk about it later. Not only did I not have to drop out of college, I ended up accelerating my pace. But in the years since college, and it's been almost 2 decades, I'm 37, I've discovered in Sabbath an anchor for those much deeper waters of identity. Trying to find and maintain a sense of self and purpose that is centered amidst all the waves of life that could pull my soul out of shape in any number of directions. Sabbath is the thing for me. One of my favorite artists is a guy named Josh Garrels, amazing artist, and he's got a song called The Resistance, in which one of the stanzas goes like this. Listen to this. We're going to throw it on the screen. He says, "My rest is a weapon." Key idea. My rest is a weapon against the oppression of man's obsession to control things. Look at the long line of make-believe kings, and the Lord of the Flies wants you to kiss his ring. Follow new rules with invisible strings and become a puppet in the diabolical scheme. How do good men become part of the regime? They don't believe in resistance. And I don't know what make-believe kings are in your world, kings not named Jesus, who demand that you kiss the ring. You know, the unseen pressures trying to shape your soul and identity in ways that make you fearful and anxious and stressed and guilty and ashamed and all these. I don't know what they are for you. I know what they are for me. Their name is Legion. But here's what I've realized. Josh is right, that rest, holy Sabbath rest, is a vital weapon in the resistance against all of that. I had to learn this the hard way, that the way to win isn't just press harder, harder, harder. The way to win involves strategic, rhythmic, obedient pause. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." That's life 101. There is a God, and it ain't you. It ain't me. And the only way to get this 101 knowledge, not just here, but like here, is the discipline of stillness. Otherwise, life's just going to whiplash you around endlessly, and you're going to be miserable. So today we're going to talk about this. This will be our title and theme. We're going to call it Sabbath, a resistance movement of holy rest. I want to recruit you today into the ranks of those who say a wise and sometimes defiant no to all the invisible strings that would gladly make you a puppet in the wrong story. And if we're not going to be in the puppet in the wrong story, it won't be by accident. It'll be on purpose. If we're going to live in the right story and, chapter to chapter, be generally sane, happy, whole people, that will be the result of wise, conscious decisions over core issues. And there's not many issues more fundamental than how we relate to our time. And because of that, like most fundamental issues, it appears on page 1 of the Bible. So today what we're going to do is just two things. First, we're going to do a biblical primer on the Sabbath. We'll look at 3 main phases of the story: creation, the commandments, 10 commandments, and Christ. We'll look at those 3 things. Secondly, we're going to spend some good time with like gritty application questions and your legit pushback. Like, yes, ma'am, I know that you've got 2 jobs and 4 kids and 8 cats and that your life is about as manageable as your hair in the morning. I see you. I know. We all know. Just put on a hat for all of our sake. For God's sake, turn off your phone so the nursery can't page you when your kid goes crazy. They'll survive. And we're going to get to your life shortly because Sabbath is, in fact, for everyone. So we're going to see that. So let's begin with the Bible. Opening pages, chapter 1, God speaks a word, and boom, there's like this ecstatic creative storm. All the stuff of the universe erupting out of seeming nothingness. There's chaos, the forces are present, they're pulling against and playing off each other like gravity and electromagnetism and strong and weak nuclear forces. There's like suddenly things like black holes and galaxies and nebulas and stars and planets and comets. And on this little planet, there's things like water and trees and flowers and animals. And at the end of this whole sequence, standing erect like an exclamation point, is the Adam, a human being, a creature with a shocking resemblance to the master of this artistic storm. All of this happens in chapter 1 of the Bible. Then in chapter 2, this is what we find. Thus, the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. The word there in Hebrew for host is tzava, tzva'am. It means the armies. All the armies were created. And on the 7th day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested. Underlying Hebrew is Shabbat. He took a Sabbath on the 7th day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the 7th day and made it holy. He made it different. He bracketed it off as a different type of time because on it, God, Shabbat, he rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So a few things to notice here. First of all, Sabbath is not some trendy New Age self-help tool. From the beginning, it has been a weight-bearing beam in the architecture of time, and it is modeled on the rhythms of the God in whose image we are made. Just like music, we were just singing some music, just like music has a beat, a time signature, 4/4, 2/4, 3/4, that sort of architects time around the melody. Just so, the universe has a time signature. It has a beat. And that beat is 6 and 1, 6 and 1, 6 and 1. And if a musician ignores the rhythm of the song, they're going to just make noise, not make music. Just so in our lives, if we ignore the beat, the rhythm of reality that God has established, we're just going to make noise in our life. We're not going to make music. Now, that word reality is worth pausing over. Usually it kind of is a big word. It points to like everything that exists, all that is. And yet, that word reality betrays a Western bias that brackets off a big part of what actually exists. The word comes, reality, from the Latin root res, which means thing. That is, we've been taught to think that for something to be real, it has to be a thing that I can touch, that I can feel. Reality is thinghood. And A reading of Genesis 1 might reinforce that. God's making all these things in outer space, in terrestrial space, a lot of objects. But then in Genesis 2, we get a curveball in the narrative. A whole new dimension opens out for us. Because after God makes a universe of physical objects, we might expect his next step to be to identify one special place, a sacred forest, a sacred mountain, as sort of that's the holy place. But that's not what God does. Instead, as we just read, he doesn't create a holy place, he creates a holy time. The first temple is not a physical building. The first temple is a temple in time. God designed things so that he would be encountered during a day of holiness, the Sabbath. Listen to how the 20th century rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel describes this and contrasts that biblical vision with the harried life that you and I live. Listen, this is really good. He says, in contrast to civilization, which seduces us to make idols of the things of space, making our livings under stress, in tension, and competition, even aching from all the ugliness we feel. In contrast to this world of space, the Sabbath is a palace in time. So this is our first step as we try to see the big picture. We can't let our view of reality be narrowed down and thingified just to objects in space. We need a more expansive sense of reality as including time, and the Sabbath as a soul-lifting, God-drenched palace within time. Does that make sense? You with me so far? So now this is also very important that it makes it into the Ten Commandments. It makes it onto the first of the two tablets. Listen to this. This is Exodus chapter 20, fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. There's that word again. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant or your livestock or the sojourner who's within your gates. Why is that? For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So a few things to notice here. First of all, this command is indexed to creation. Why should we work 6, rest 1, work 6, rest 1? Because that's what God did. And because we're made in his image, how he rolls, we roll. Very simple. It's connected to creation. Number 2, did you notice how the command expands beyond the individual? It's not just a day for you to rest, but for you and your family and your employees and your farm animals or machinery, for the homeless immigrant on your sidewalk. This is a day for everyone to rest. That's point 2. Point 3, and this is kind of the reverse issue from the Sabbath, but the Bible's very clear about this as well. 6 days you shall work. Not maybe, not if you just sort of feel like it. Shall. Work is every bit as much part of the shape of things as is rest. And of course, that will land with different people depending on the culture you're from. You know, some cultures put such a high value on work that the Bible is mind-blowing in one direction. Like, you mean I don't have to work every day? No, you don't. But some cultures put such a low value on work that the Bible is mind-blowing in a different direction. You mean I gotta, like, work 6 days in a row? Yes, you do. So some of you come from cultures that, like, put up high value on efficiency, discipline, performance, and the Bible's going to challenge you in one way. You got to back off that. But some of you, you know, if you're like a ski bum who's never held down a real job and play Madden and Call of Duty in your mom's basement all day, the Bible's going to challenge you in another direction. Fortunately for you, that's not today's sermon. But by the way, just to be clear about something, the term work in the Bible doesn't simply mean employment with a paycheck. Like, that's a good thing. Employment's good. But it's not talking about being on the clock 6 days a week all day. That's not what it's talking about. It's probably not healthy. In the Bible, work means something like purposeful, creative activity. And that can be present both on and off the clock. Does that make sense? So it's a category that includes but is bigger than employment. Okay, let's look forward from the Ten Commandments to what happens next. On his deathbed, the end of the Torah, Deuteronomy 32, Moses is very clear. When I die, all y'all are going to go crazy and break the covenant. It's just going to happen. And it does. Over the next many hundred years of Israelite history, under judges and kings and prophets and priests, the people regularly fail to keep the covenant, and one of the main symptoms of that is Sabbath breaking. It's identified time and again as one of the main reasons that God is forced to send his people away into exile, booted out of their homeland to a life of servitude abroad. And if you want to do some Bible homework this week on your own to see how this theme develops, the connection between exile and Sabbath, have a look at Jeremiah 17, Ezekiel 20, Isaiah 56 and 58, Nehemiah 13. And one of the themes that emerges, one of the beautiful aspects, is that Sabbath isn't just for humans, it's also for the land. The soil needs rest. God cares about the earth. But here's the bigger picture is actually kind of funny. Think about this. If the catastrophe of exile is in some way God giving his people a spanking for not keeping the Sabbath, how crazy is it that God has to twist people's arm at all to do this? Because as we're going to see in a minute, Sabbath is like the best day of the week. It is the day to like spoil yourself in the best sense of the term. It's the best. You'd think we'd be dying for this. But no, we say we don't want that. And so God is forced into the kind of bizarre position of saying, no, my child, I'm sorry. You won the lottery. You are going to take this money. You are going to enjoy this windfall. I don't want to hear it. You will take this gift. It's kind of bizarre. We humans are slow on the uptake sometimes. And that continues. Because what happens next in the biblical story after the exile? It's what often happens in human history. A massive overcorrection. So if the Israelites before the exile were like, Sabbath, shmameth, who cares? We're not doing that. The Jews after the exile got like militant about it. Like, all right, we learned our lesson. We are going to keep this meticulously because we are not doing exile thing again. We've been there, done that, and not doing that. And so what transpired, and this brings us up to the day of Jesus, was a swing of the pendulum from an extreme of carelessness to an extreme of carefulness. And this just distorted the day in an opposite but equal way. According to some of the stricter teachings of the time, you are guilty on Sabbath if you climb any trees, swim in water, or ride on an animal. So, sorry kids, fun is forbidden. On the Sabbath, you may not dance, clap your hands, or slap your hips. So no getting your groove on. You probably shouldn't come to the Bay Church. You are doing forbidden work if you carry enough milk for a sip, enough honey to put on a wound, enough rope to make the handle of a basket, enough ink to write 2 letters. You can write 1 letter, but not 2. And there are other workarounds. You can carry these things if you carry them in your teeth, or if you carry them on the top of your foot like this, or you could pass them from person to person. There are sneaky workarounds. Now, married couples should take care to get pregnant at a time that would not make birth on a Sabbath likely. So here's the scenario. Baby, I know it's date night here in the city of David, and I gotta say, you're looking better than Bubble Bathsheba. But I did the math, and 9 months from today is a Sabbath. So one of us is sleeping on the floor tonight. Do you want to do a thumb war or a cross? Of course, we don't have time for the delicate theological issue of whether one can eat eggs that were laid by a hen on the Sabbath, because that chicken was in violation of the law. Clearly, off to Chick-fil-A with you. If you read the stories about Jesus in the Gospels, it's hard not to notice what seems like a mischievous streak. Like, this guy seems to be going out of his way to do things on the Sabbath that just tick people off. And what? Are they just a bunch of grumps? No. Exile is at stake for them. They're saying, we know what happens when we don't keep Sabbath. And so you read these stories, and it's easy to get the impression that Jesus is just sort of cavalier, or that he's hell-bent on burning down this whole institution. Like, he is anti-Sabbath. Only the Pharisees keep Sabbath. But that whole line of thought that Jesus is anti-Sabbath, so we should be too, that misses the wider context that we were just looking at a moment ago, where there's a comedy of rules and regulations that subvert the purpose of the day. That is what Jesus is taking on. His Sabbath mischief is not at all a rejection of the rhythms set by his Father at the beginning. Rather, what he's doing, this is a key part of his ministry strategy, is a deliberate, sustained intervention to the Sabbath designed to restore balance to the day, bringing to equilibrium a pendulum that often swings between license and law. And he's trying to bring balance. This may not be what you learned in church growing up, but this is really important for us to see this, is that Jesus was not anti-Sabbath. Jesus was and is, he's alive, pro-Sabbath. He went out of his way to be pro-Sabbath. This is not a sideshow for him. Why does he care so much about this? Because he knows something about us that doesn't change, that we humans, without a weekly rhythm of rest, life becomes a living hell. We can't handle it. We're not designed for it. True, we can't overburden it with rules and regulations that end up harming the very people it's supposed to help. That's Jesus' point in his first century context. But we can't throw out the baby with the bubbly bathwater here. So, okay, that's our Bible primer on Sabbath. Creation, commandments, Christ. It's pretty unanimous. Sabbath matters. But the question then is, okay, how do we do this? You know, I live in the Bay Area, 21st century, my life's busy. How do I do this? And moreover, why should I do this? What are the results of doing it well? And let's start there, because if you're like me, before I buy a product, I read the reviews. Like, what are people saying? Does this thing work? So we'll start there. I'll share from my own experience and pick up where we left in college. So when I began Sabbathing, at the time I'm like addicted to busyness, driven by underlying questions about my identity and worth. And yet I'm falling further and further behind. There's just nothing in the tank. And the first many weeks I tried to Sabbath, that temptation was always the same. I'd get right up to the day where, tomorrow I'm going to Sabbath, and I'd have this dread where I'm like, I need that day so bad. If I don't work on that day, if I don't do this, this, and this, I'm going to flunk out. Life's going to come apart for me. But then I said to myself, you know what? I don't care. I'll flunk out. I'm tired of living how I'm living. So I didn't miss a Sabbath. And the results were startling for me. Not only did I not flunk out, I ended up graduating 3 semesters early. Summa cum laude student of the year. I don't know how I did that. Honestly, what I found is that I got a heck of a lot more done in 6 days with a Sabbath than I ever got done in 7 days. It just supercharged. And it wasn't a one-off thing. This continued in my life. Most academic degrees have a set time period, like a BA is 4 years or whatever. But when I began a PhD program at Harvard, I was starting a program that was open-ended. 5 years is the minimum, but usually 6, 7, 8. They probably won't kick you out to like 12. It's open-ended. And I started the program in my cohort with 13 other students. And 5 years later, at graduation, only one of us had finished. And you're looking at him. And honestly, I was like, where is everybody? I thought, where's my friends? And I think the answer was, they're back in a library somewhere, too busy to Sabbath. And I debated with myself whether to tell you this, because I don't want to seem braggy. Really, this is about a brag on God. And it is about, the reason I decided to tell you this is I want you to have proof. I want you to have evidence of 2 things. First, that Sabbath is compatible with your crazy busy season of life. Secondly, it's probably the best way to supercharge yourself through that crazy busy season of life. It's not only an option, it's probably your best option. And there's an irony here that I often saw on display among my frenetically stressed out classmates. It's this. Could you throw it up on the screen? The irony is this. When we obsessively seek to maximize our output, I can't take a rest, I got to get this done, we end up minimizing our output. But when we willingly minimize our output in obedience to God, we maximize it somehow. That is so true. And honestly, it's the tithe principle as well. God gave us 2 fractions. It's not complex. 1/10, 1/7. Give to God 1/10 of your income, 1/7 of your time, even when that feels impossible. Of course, it's going to feel impossible. Do it anyways. It's about trust, it's about control. Do it and see what happens. Because heaven's math, God's math, is just different than our math. And for me, the bigger brag on God about all of this is that, honestly, I still very much have a tendency to get the blues and to feel behind and like a failure. Over the years, he's helped me locate my identity only in my belovedness to God and not in things that are intrinsically fragile and unstable like my own performance and achievement, over which at the end of the day, I have very little control. It's enormously liberating to uncouple your sense of self from what you are able to achieve and do, because that's unreliable. And this, this is the reason I can speak freely about all this stuff, honestly, because frankly, I've come to the point, I don't really care what you think. Don't take that wrong. I don't care. Harvard schmarvard, I follow Jesus. He knows me. Honestly, I don't know how well I know him, but I know that he knows me, and notwithstanding all the ugly stuff he knows about me, he loves me anyways. And this is the real payoff of a Sabbath practice. It is in the deeper waters of identity. Listen to how the philosopher James K.A. Smith puts this. He says, "We don't need coaches who will help us manage our time. This isn't about having a better executive coach, and that's fine, whatever. What we really need, though, are prophets who make us face our histories and futures." Sabbath gets you off that productivity treadmill and gives you a perch from which to reconcile with who you have been, who you are, and who you are, in fact, becoming. So, okay, that's enough there. Sabbath works. Takes my word for it. Let's talk shop about how to do it, because it's very true that rest is an art. And like all arts, all art forms, it's going to take discipline and practice. This isn't easy. It's going to take work. There's going to be obstacles that you have to overcome. So let's talk about a few of those. We're going to call it our list of, yeah, but, ... Some of you are like, yeah, but Pastor, excuse me, I work on weekends, so I can't Sabbath. Don't you have to do this on Saturday or Sunday? And the answer is no. You can do it any day of the week, whatever works for you, but what matters is that it's the same day of the week, so that a rhythm emerges of 6 and 1, 6 and 1. That is the beat that we are designed for. Same day every week. Now, yes, there are certain societies, like Israel today, actually, where everyone Sabbaths on the same day. It's quite amazing. Like in Jerusalem, Friday night at sundown, a horn blows over the whole city, and everything shuts down. It's a big city, lots of traffic and stuff, but on Sabbath, like you can hear the wind blowing in the trees. It's really amazing. And what's the real benefit of Sabbathing on the same day with other people is the space it provides for relationship, for family time. In Jerusalem, Sabbath is very much family day, but you can make family day whatever works for your schedule. For me and Sarah, it's Fridays. That's what works for us. Okay, so here's another yeah, but, and this one's a little bit more serious. Yeah, but, Pastor, I am just, like, uber busy. Like, honestly, you don't understand the details of my life. I am intensely busy, and I believe you. I do not doubt that your life is overwhelming. I would read for you a verse from the Torah that speaks to just that issue. This is Exodus 34, verse 21. It says this: 6 days you shall work, on the 7th day you shall rest. We got that. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. This is a farm community, farm economy. Timely plowing and harvesting is everything. Everything hinges on that. And the Bible goes out of its way to say, even then, even when it's do or die time, even when it's crunch time, you really need the Sabbath. And so what does that mean for us? It means that even if you're a student, even when you're in final exams, even when you're landing that big business deal that you've been working on intensely for a long time, even when your kid is in soccer playoffs, you still got a Sabbath. And a more common variety here of the yeah, but I'm too busy line is this: yeah, Pastor, I can't really Sabbath right now, but I'm going to Maui in 2 months, and I will rest then. To which I say, that's fine. Here's my number. When your marriage goes south and your kids won't talk to you anymore and your health is destroyed, give me a call. I'll be here. Because this is something Ray taught me. If you put your work ahead of your marriage, eventually you'll have neither. If you put your work ahead of your health, eventually you'll have neither. Things like relationship and physical health require time, downtime, time to rest and restore. God knows that. That is why he gave us the Sabbath. It is his answer to safeguard these gifts in our lives. Vacations are great. They're a wonderful reset, but they're not a sustainable way of life. So to be clear, I'm not saying no to Maui. I'm saying yes to Sabbath and Maui. And bring your family to Maui if you can. But if you have to choose, you should skip Maui. Okay, that brings us to this one. Yeah, but Pastor, I got kids. They won't let me ever rest for an hour, let alone a whole day. I can't Sabbath. It's impossible for me. I'm very sympathetic with that. Sarah and I, we've got a 9-month-old daughter, Eden, and she's given us a run for our money. And we're 2 on 1. What happens when it's 2 on 2 or 2 on 3, 4, 5, whatever? What happens when you become the Morgan family? I don't know. Or to say nothing of being a single parent, trying to lift this burden on your own. This is tough stuff. So here's what you do. You get with your spouse, if you have one. First of all, pray. Ask for God's help. And then get really creative. Plan ahead. Have the courage to cut some things from your schedule or the kids' schedule and find a way to support the family in a weekly Sabbath practice. There is a way. When I was growing up in a family of 4 kids, we didn't have a formal Sabbath, but my parents had some Sabbath-light rules that I now admire. So first of all, Sunday was no homework day. Like, get it done beforehand. It's the Lord's Day. It's a day for enjoyment, which also meant it was a calorie-free day. Like there's calories don't exist. You can eat whatever you want on this day. I liked that. Secondly, when I was in high school, my friends were amused by what they called my funometer, which meant that all my friends knew that my parents would only allow me to do 1 extracurricular thing on the weekend, at max 2, after which my funometer had bust, and I'd have to stay home and be with the family. And do you know what that produced for me? It made me deeply unpopular and gave me social trauma. No, it didn't do that. Who played the crickets in the background right there? I hear that. That's very funny. That's very hurtful. No, I'm traumatized for other reasons, not that. What the funometer did was make sure that we had family time on the weekends and that my mom didn't just become taxi service forever. At the time, I didn't love it, but I see the wisdom now. Sarah and I, like I said, Friday Sabbaths, and we've got to be creative sometimes to make sure that we're each getting what we need. So I'll give you an example. Last Sabbath, here's how it went down. Woke up at 6 a.m., kid is crying. I got up, I fed her, changed diaper, put her back down, and then I went to my little study cave and I read and played the guitar for a couple hours. That's very restful for me. Then when Sarah got up, she's been working crazy hard as mama. And so she actually cut loose and went to Pete's for a while to get a cup of coffee and to journal. I put the kid in a backpack, and we walked down the road to the park, and I shot some hoops for a while. It was fun. Then in the afternoon, we all got back together. We collapsed in the living room for multiple hours, watched a show. Eden was in the pack and play. And then in the evening, I did something I haven't done in years. I went to a high school basketball game. I love the game. I played all the way through high school. And I'll tell you, California basketball is very different than Montana basketball, where I grew up. I saw more dunks in the first 3 minutes of the game than I saw in my whole high school career in Montana. Very different thing. It was a solid Sabbath. We had some good time together. We each got to recreate in ways that helped us. So you can make it work. As we move towards a close, let's hit a few best practices for Sabbath, things to bear in mind. First of all, it's important to note the word recreation literally means recreation. So what you find recreational will be unique to what recreates you. For me, I need time to read. Sarah wanted some time to journal. You might want time to woodwork. You might want time to hike or garden or to go up on the couch. Whatever recreates you, that's great. But that leads to second point, which is this: integrate fun with holiness. This is really, really key. Sabbath is not a day off just to kind of, blow some steam and have some fun. No, remember what we saw in Genesis and Exodus. It is defined by holiness, the presence of God. And encountering the presence of God is what actually restores us. If you don't do that, you're going to wake up the next day and still be tired. It is encountering God that ultimately recharges us. Third, make Sabbath a digital detox. Did you know these things have off buttons? Hold down, little thing will come, slide it over, and it goes off. Once a week, do that with all your devices. Like, put them away. You'll survive. In fact, more than survive, you'll love it. Fourth, bless your sphere of influence. As we saw in the Ten Commandments, it's not just a day for me, myself, and I. It is a day for your sphere, for people around you, for your family, for your employees, whatever. So use your judgment, but the spirit of the day is to spread the blessing around. And fifth, find a way to adopt rituals that mark the time. By which I mean this. When we're busy, we can't just flip a switch in our mind into Sabbath mode. It doesn't work that way. What you need to do is create a ritual that says to yourself, that says clearly, I am now changing from that busy time. The week is over, I didn't get it all done, but whatever, I am leaving that behind, and now I am entering holy rest. So I want us to do what the Jewish people do on Friday evenings when they have their family. They all get together for Sabbath meal, and they light a candle, and they say blessings over bread and wine, which, if you're a Jesus follower, think about how on Friday evening he gave his body, he gave his blood for us. And before Sunday morning, before the explosion of light on Easter, before the eruption of new energy and joy, what did he do first? He rested for a full day on Sabbath in the grave.